I would like to thank Bishop Toshiyuki Umitani and Mrs. Umitani, Reverend Ai Hironaka, Reverend Tomo Hojo, Reverend Satoshi Tomioka, Dr. Warren Tamamoto, and the Triple Celebration Steering Committee for inviting me today on this wonderful occasion. And I'd like to thank you all for coming to today's occasion. The overarching theme of today's joyous event is entitled Sharing the Joy of Nembutsu Together, Our Living Heart of Gratitude. And my talk today is in keeping with that theme and is titled Why Life is Great, Understanding Our Moment in Timelessness. To put it succinctly, when we put our lives into proper perspective through the Buddha Dharma, we come to see how our lives are put into proper perspective, and we come to see how one's life is but the expression of great life. And this understanding will naturally lead us to a life of deep gratitude where we want to share this teaching with other people. I'd like to go into more detail of what I mean by this today. I'm first going to talk about who Amida Buddha is. Then I'll talk about what our connection to Amida Buddha is. And this connection is found through the Nembutsu. And that might seem easy, but there's a problem. And that problem is the human being of blind passions. Finally, I will show that despite having these blind passions, we are still embraced in the world of great compassion. So what is Amida Buddha? And to begin with, I'd like to talk about who Amida is. Amida is the conjunction of two names, Amitabha and Amitayus. Okay? So I'd like to talk about Amitabha first. Amitabha, or this is a negation. It's kind of like the word, like impossible, the prefix im, or decrease, the prefix d, right? This becomes a negation. Okay? Mita is meter, or to measure, to be able to calculate. And then finally, abha is light. The next one, Amitayus, is a negation. Mita is a meter, or to measure, to be able to calculate. And then ayus, life. So Amitabha means the Buddha of immeasurable light, or boundless light. And then the light emanating from the Buddha is much too much for us to see and be able to understand. And I'll explain what that is. And then Amitayus is boundless light. Okay. So I'd like to give you an example of the power of the Buddha's light. When we think of the source of physical light, we think of the sun, right? When we were little children, we were told not to look directly at the sun, right? Otherwise, we would destroy our eyes and we would not be able to see anymore. A few years ago, a political leader of ours looked directly into the sun, but I'll leave that aside. But anyway, we're told when we're little not to look at the sun, right? And the power of the sun is much too bright and powerful for our eyes to be able to withstand. It's not that the sun wants to hurt us or that the sun wants to punish us. It's just that we don't have the capability as humans to be able to afford this kind of strength. Similarly, we don't have the capabilities to fully understand the Buddha's wisdom and the power it has. When we look directly at the Buddha's wisdom, it is indescribable, inexplicable, and inconceivable, or what's known in Japanese as fukasho, fukasetsu, fukashi. We're unable to comprehend what it means and the depth of this wisdom. And this is why it's very easy to be slanderous of the Buddha Dharma and think it's a bunch of mumbo jumbo, right? It's easy to shun, ignore, and criticize things we do not understand. So when we don't understand something like the Buddha's wisdom, it's very easy to think that there's something wrong with Buddhism. Not me. I'm not the problem, right? It's very easy to think like this. I'm not the ignorant one here. Buddhism is. Buddhism should be made to be more understandable for the modern age. Buddhism needs to change its methods to be more accessible and understandable to the common masses. We hear these criticisms all the time, both within and outside the Sangha, and within and outside the temple. However, the problem isn't Buddhism. The problem is the egocentric mind that is immature and impatient, unwilling to learn the teaching that has so much depth. Returning back to the conversation about light, how do we connect with this? If it's something too powerful for us to understand, how do we know it's there? How do we even know that it exists? We know of this light when there's something that does not emanate light that obstructs its working. For the sun, for example, let's say there's a car or a house, right? And that's when we can contrast that which does not give light to that which does give light. And then we can see this beautiful car, this beautiful home, right? Similarly, with what do we contrast the light or the wisdom of Amida Buddha? By something that hinders this light, which would be none other than this self, right? It is this self-blind passion that doesn't give off any light whatsoever that contrasts the light of the Buddha. And when we contrast these two, that's when the power of the Buddha's wisdom can be seen. It is so all-pervasive and universal that no one can stand in its way forever. We might be blocking it now or for some time, but in due time, ourselves, our very selves, will be embraced, and we will also be that which helps to spread this light throughout the 10 quarters. As a matter of fact, if it were not for these blind passions that I harbor, we would be unable to encounter the depth of this wisdom. Shinran Shonin states the following, quote, obstructions of karmic evil turn into virtues. It is like the relation of ice and water. The more the ice, the more the water. The more the obstructions, the more the virtues, end quote. And what our founder is pointing out here is that our blind passions engulfs our hearts, suffocating us, never giving us a moment's rest. It's like an anchor that pulls us down into this abyss of our suffering. The karmic ignorance is like ice, but when there is something that changes this water, namely the light or the heat of the Buddha's wisdom, then that very ice becomes the source of the water of virtues. My ice-cold heart becomes the very source of cool, refreshing water. And this is what we mean by the wisdom of the Buddha. It is boundless spiritual light that illuminates our dark hearts. And for this reason, it's called Amitabha. Similarly, there's also the term Amitayus, which means the Buddha of immeasurable life, or boundless life. I'd like to give you an example of what I mean by this. If you could take a look at my chicken scratch over here drawing here. Imagine that each one of us is a life with a lowercase l, okay? We are beings of egocentricity, where this I is the center of the world. I look at the world with this I as the center of the universe, right? If this were a movie about me, I'd be Tom Cruise, right? I get the trophy wife, I have the most screen time, right? And what I say is the most important part of this movie, right? All of you have supporting roles, right? In my movie, right? You're all side characters, right? Not as important as the all-important me. However, my world is small. It is a world with this lowercase l. And I could go on in this entire life without even realizing anything other than this one that I know. Many people do. But suppose there's something that shatters this worldview. It is something that comes from outside. And when that occurs, I awaken to a greater reality that envelops and embraces me despite this egocentric worldview that I have. And what I awaken to is great life with a capital L. Right? We call this in Japanese, Muryo-ju Nyorai. Muryo-ju Nyorai. The Tathagata of immeasurable life. It is great life. Hence, the title of my talk today, Why Life is Great. Life is great because we awaken to Muryo-ju Nyorai. See, this great life, the great part, it doesn't mean that I lived a fulfilled life and a wonderful life with a loving spouse, many children, with a white picket fence in the affluent part of town, and I lived to the ripe age of so-and-so after my retirement. That's not what I mean by great life. At least not at first. those standards are fleeting and actually unrealistic. Why? Well, what happens if I don't get that? Any one of those? What happens if any of those things in my checklist isn't met? Does that mean I can't live a great life? That's not what Jodo Shinshu means when they say the word great. When all the ministers here, it was a wonderful service today, wasn't it? And when all the ministers say great practice or great shinji, great is actually a technical term. Okay? It means it comes from the world of enlightenment. Thus come Tathagata. In other words, it is the world of truth. So when I say great life, that's not referring to Takashi Miyaji with a wonderful life with an arbitrarily selected fleeting criteria of what I selfishly wanted in this life. Rather, great life is referring to Buddha, Amida Buddha, the world of enlightenment, nirvana, pure land, the transcendent reality of boundless clarity and warmth. It is a world that accepts me as I am with all of my foolish attributes. Ironically, when I awaken to great life, as you can see in this picture, it is not just the self that is embraced, but I awaken to this reality that embraces everyone. Everyone is embraced in this. We saw this in today's service when everybody was chanting together. Everybody is shining. Everybody is participating in this. That's what Amida Tathagata shows us. The first line of the Shoshinge, I couldn't recite it because I got choked up. Because I realized everybody is in this together. Everybody is embraced together. So this is what we mean by amitayus, immeasurable life. Right? So just to review here, light is a metaphor for the Buddha's wisdom, and life is a metaphor for the Buddha's compassion. And previously, wisdom and compassion was referring to the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay? But over time, this wisdom and compassion is not referring just to Shakyamuni Buddha, it's referring to enlightenment itself. Okay? Absolute truth is wise, okay? Precisely because it is the summation of all things interconnected. Absolute truth is compassionate because no one gets left out of this picture. So Amitabha and Amitayus are referring to the one and the same Buddha. It is the one absolute truth. So then, another question that I come in to get is, well, if it's a representation, if it's a metaphor, does that mean then Amida Buddha is not real? Amida Buddha is very real. It is as real as your existence is. Without you, there is no Amida. This is called imotsushi in Japanese. Or maybe I should say, without you, there is no need for Amida. Amida Buddha is wisdom beyond what we're capable of understanding. But this wisdom then transfers over and makes itself known to us. Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto Sensei says in this way, wisdom expressed as compassion. Wisdom expressed as compassion. So this wisdom then it gets expressed as Amida Buddha, expressed as Namo Amida Butsu, which then we hear, right? Oh, right? And then we feel this connection to the world of absolute truth. So what's our connection to Amida Buddha then? The world of Buddha or wisdom expressed as compassion reveals itself to us in the form of Amida Buddha. And how do we know this then? How do we know that this came to be? Well, in the larger sutra, Shakyamuni Buddha talks about how there is the Amida Buddha, the most supreme of all Buddhas, right? And it is because Amida Buddha has established this path to spiritual liberation for all sentient beings, even the ones who have no hope of attaining enlightenment themselves. It is only in Amida's pure land where both the Bonbu, or the ordinary being, and the sage can be born together in the pure land. And the way to be born in Amida's pure land is explained in the process of the 5 vows, 17, 18, 11, 12, and 13. If you fall asleep, that's okay. I won't stay on this that long. But anyway, in this 18th vow, it states the following. If when I attain Buddhahood, the sentient beings in the 10 quarters who, with sincere and entrusting heart, aspire to be born in my land and say my name even 10 times, should not be born there, may I not attain the perfect enlightenment. Excluded are those who commit the 5 great offenses and those who slander the right dharma. But so this yellow section here is referring to the 3 minds, Shishin, Shingyo, Yokusho. This is referring to the 18th vow, or it's encapsulated as the entrusting mind, or Shinji. This green area is referring to the 17th vow of the Nembutsu. This blue area, should not be born there, is referring to the 11th vow. And in this gray area, may not attain the perfect enlightenment, is referring to the 12th and 13th. So all of these 5 are grouped into the one primal vow, which we call the 18th vow. Okay? And in this vow, it says that those who encounter the Nembutsu, awaken the entrusting mind, and respond to the Buddha by saying the Buddha's name, will then have a path to spiritual liberation, regardless of who they are. So I know what I just said was a little bit doctrinal. So I'd like to give you an example here. Okay? Right? Anyway, suppose there is a mother, right? A mother who's pregnant and says to the baby, call me Mama. I am Mama. Mama. Even before the baby is born, right? In the womb, the mother is talking to the child. Mama, Mama, call me Mama. I am Mama. I am here for you. Mama, Mama. So then the baby is born. And then as the mother holds the child, says, Mama, Mama, call me Mama. I am here for you. And the baby at first hears this, and it's a bunch of gibberish, right? But knows to associate this word with warmth, with care, with love. And over time, as the baby starts to make this connection, then realizes to respond. If I say Mama, I know I'm being cared for. When I say Mama, I know there is a love that I have a connection to. Thank you, I have this. When I say Mama, I know there is security. So then the baby says and responds, Mama, right? Wouldn't you know? It's the same thing with us. The world of absolute truth depicted as Amida Buddha calls out to us, says to us, Namo Amida. This is the world of truth that embraces you as you are. There is a path to spiritual liberation, a way to true peace, right? That it is hard to realize. And at first, it sounds like a bunch of gibberish. Mumbo jumbo. What is this? This doesn't make any sense, right? Over time, as we listen and we listen, we start to realize we are actually being called upon by the world of absolute truth. And the words, Namo Amida Butsu, comes out of our mouths in response. So it's this process of call and response that is taking place. We are being called upon by the world of truth, whereby we respond by recognizing this world of truth. So as I mentioned earlier, that Amitabha and Amitayus, the 2 names of Amida Buddha, are boundless light and life, boundless wisdom and compassion. In other words, Amida is the embodiment of limitlessness. It's the transcendence of diametrically opposed entities like black and white, up and down, left and right. Left and right, okay? Keep that in mind as you think about elections this year. But right and wrong, good and evil, right? Absolute truth transcends these things, okay? It is the world of limitlessness. Okay, so in the context of space, the Pure Land is without bounds. In the context of time, Amida Buddha's wisdom has existed since the infinite past and will continue on into the infinite future. Right? In contrast to this self is very small. I only occupy this small field within the vast cosmos. In terms of lifetime, my lifetime can be calculated in mere years. So how does this world of unlimitedness and the world of the limited meet? Where does it meet? It meets when we say Namo Amida Butsu. It can happen at any time, right? If you can be going on a walk by yourself, when you see your grandchild take his first steps, it can be at a funeral of a loved one. Right? When you say Namo Amida Butsu, right there, the Buddha emerges. And when I say that, I don't mean Buddha emerges like, genie in a bottle or something, right? Or Buddha pops on his head, hey, you okay? You good, right? It doesn't emerge like that, right? But it is this contact, right, with the world of the limitless. When you say Namo Amida Butsu, that's what we mean. That's that dot, that white dot, Namo Amida Butsu. And the easiest place that this can happen is at the temple, Otera, okay? The temple Hondo is the portal to the world of the unlimited. I'll say that one more time. The temple Hondo is the portal to the world of the unlimited. That's why the temple is such a crucial and sacred place. It's not just some place where you go light incense and doze off as the minister is talking about their bad day at the DMV, right? The temple is the juncture of the world of the unlimited and the world of the limited meeting, right? Again, this can ideally happen anywhere, but the temple is set up for that. The temple is built for that. It is designated for this rare and wondrous occasion to occur. And the Nembutsu is the key to that connection. That's why the temple is a sacred place and why we emphasize reciting the name Namo Amida Butsu. The temple is not just a place to cook chicken teriyaki, right? Or where we practice judo. Right? It's not a parking lot where we park our cars for a little while when we go shopping to the Japanese market. Right? I know what's going on. Ministers always know. Okay, so then moving on then, what's the problem? Well, if you do not allow ourselves the opportunity to hear and receive the Buddha's calling voice, right, then we'll continue on in this cycle of birth and death. So Shinran Shonin encourages us to seek the path and listen to the Buddha Dharma. We have to try and seek out Amida Buddha's calling voice. So we have to actively listen now. And it's in our pursuit of this that our hearts open up for this message to enter us. And Shinran Shonin calls this Eshin, this 180-degree turn, right? It goes from one of egocentricity to Amida-centricity. It's this idea of going from me, 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 me to me, 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 me. Wait a minute. Maybe there's something more going on here, right? And then we go back to me, 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 and then some other time later on it goes me, me, me. Wait a minute. Maybe there is something going on. Maybe it's about Amida Buddha. Thank you for embracing me, Amida Buddha. Thank you for embracing all sentient beings. And then we go back to me, 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 right? In other words, we can't fully break away from this egocentric worldview, but there are glimpses. There are glimpses of catching the self being egocentric. And these glimpses are made possible by receiving, but momentarily, receiving the Buddha's eyes. This example would maybe not be the best example, but it's kind of like being slapped in the face, okay? When you get slapped in the face, it's like there's this shock that happens, and you kind of have this out-of-body experience where you see yourself as you truly are, right? And then you go back to being yourself again. But all it took was that one instance in which you saw your true and naked self as you are. There's a technical term that we use for this. We call it the one thought moment of Shinji. It's the first time that we're jolted into seeing reality as such, into seeing the complete and naked foolish self that we are, and what we've been doing all this time. It is a moment of deep hazukashisa, or embarrassment in one's foolish self. Some will call this shame. Some people don't like that word, so they'll use self-reproach. If you don't like that word, there's another one, lamentation, or perhaps regret. This is on the left side, okay? But what's important to note is that Jodo Shinshu Buddhism doesn't end on this self-deprecating note, okay? It is always coupled with momentous joy and elation that one is embraced by the world of truth, Amida Buddha's great working. One becomes deeply humbled and grateful for that slap in the face. So this happiness on the one hand and this self-reproach on the other, right, combine to make this understanding resolve of simple quietude of the heart. It is a firm yet flexible state of equilibrium within the heart, where one is not in delirium with ecstasy, but is also not in a state of utter depression and self-hatred. One isn't jumping with joy, right? Nor whipping oneself in the back over one's past karmic transgressions. It is a quiet and calm easiness of the heart. It is the phenomenon of being made to let go of the egocentric self. That is the content of Shinji. Connecting with the world of great compassion. In many aspects of our life, we're taught or conditioned to think about things from a logical standpoint, right? We're taught this at a very early age. We're taught that we have to use our smarts to get ahead, that we need to use our logical sensibilities to understand this world, and the reason why the world is suffering is because we're not being logical, right? That's what we're taught. And to a certain extent, that's true, and I'm not denying that at all. Buddhism is not denying that at all, right? However, we also have to remember that the story doesn't stop there, right? One must then continue to the next step, which is to understand that there is a world that doesn't operate on our logical understanding of it. Or maybe I should say, there is a world that operates on a logical basis far different from the one that we are accustomed to here in this world of delusion. We have to understand that there is a world of truth that transcends human reasoning. So then, every time I say that, I always get the question, does that mean we need to make a leap of faith then? Right? Does that mean we must abandon our logical thinking and blindly believe what we're told in some kind of dogma? No, absolutely not. Because for us Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, religion and science are not at odds with each other. They are not pitted against each other. In fact, religion helps us to affirm the realities of science, and science helps us only to reaffirm our religious understanding. But nevertheless, the world of absolute truth is not something we access through our rational thinking. It's something we connect to intuitively than we can ever fathom with our intellectual minds. But in some weird sense, we kind of already know this, right? It's not something that's completely foreign to us. We feel it at certain times in our lives, but we can't quite understand that world that reaches out to us. We feel it, we sense it, but we cannot quite pinpoint what it is. What is this connection that I feel, right, with something outside of me? And those are the moments in which truth is calling out to us. I know you have these moments, I'm certain of it. The very fact that you're a living being means that you have had these connections at one time or another. And I'm looking forward to your personal accounts of these times, to hearing those. For Shinran Shonin, he explains those moments as hearing the calling voice of Amida Buddha's voiceless voice. When we open our hearts and answer that call, the Buddha's heart coincides with mine. That's when I see both the futility and profundity of this life. That's when I see both the lunacy and the quietude of my life. That's when I see samsara embraced in nirvana. This is the Buddha's perspective. It gives us the chance to see the self as it truly is. But like the blinding light that is too bright for us to see, as mentioned before, the Buddha's bright and warm world of light is far beyond that which we can comprehend. We can get a sense of it, but we can't quite understand it clearly, right? And this is the encountering of truth. It is not something that is understood with human rationality. It is something that is intuitively felt. I'd like to give you an example that might help to portray what I'm talking about. My grandfather, Takashi Miyaji, was a Buddhist scholar who taught at Kyoto Women's University for a long time. And a lot of people remember him fondly as a really passionate speaker of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Sometimes he was very well known to cry in his Dharma messages, as he was often moved to great compassion by Amida Buddha's great compassion. But I knew him more as Oji-chan, right? Grandpa. Right? And not really as a scholar that he was. But I do, I have very many memories of him. But today I'd like to share with you a story that my father told me. My grandfather, Uno Kakue, was born in Nara, Japan, in a temple known as Ryujoji, which is located in a village called Yoshino. However, at a young age, he was adopted into the Miyaji family, who had close ties with Ryujoji, and where the Uno family resided. And I should also point out that the Uno family of Ryujoji and the Miyaji family of Daizenji owned a temple that they resided, which is very common in Japan. So this is depicted here in the map here, the right side being Nara and the left side being Shikoku. So my grandfather became Kakue Miyaji instead of Uno. And the Miyaji family lived in Kochi, Japan, which is in the island of Shikoku. And the Miyaji family had no children. So you could imagine that when my grandfather was adopted into the family, which was not an uncommon practice in Japan at the time, that they were really happy that he came to the family, right? He recalled that in particular his adopted mother, Komano-san was her name, the mother of Miyaji, Komano, showered him with love and treated him with great care, almost to the point of pampering him, right? And when my grandfather went off to study Buddhism in Kyoto, he would come home from time to time to Shikoku. And in those days, you'd have to take this ferry to cross and get from Honshu to Shikoku. And every time he would come home, his mother would be waiting for him at the front of the port, waving at him. Right, that's right. And so she'd be waiting for him at the front of the port, right? In fact, he would be a little bit embarrassed, right, because the mom would just come to this port, right? When he would come out of the ferry, he would see her at the dock, and the first thing she would say is, "When's the next time you're coming home? When's the next time you're coming home? 今度いつ帰ってくるの? 今度いつ帰ってくるの? It's not even, "Whoa, how was the trip over here? What would you like to eat?" The first thing that she would say is, "When's the next time you're coming home?" Right? And so you could kind of get this sense of this endearing mother that she really, loved him dearly, right? And after some time, he was conscripted into and drafted into the Japanese army. He was sent off to Manchuria. And unfortunately, the Komano-san during this time passes away. And so she was cremated according to Japanese custom, and her remains were kept in a wooden box urn at the Daizenji temple in Shikoku. Then the war ended, and fortunately, my grandfather survived this war and was able to come back to Japan. Now, in many cities in Japan, they were firebombed, right? And so the houses many of them were built out of wood. So the urban city centers were reduced to ash and rubble quite easily, right? But Kochi, however, for the most part, remained unscathed and unbombed. And as such, most of the city was left intact, except for what would be one of the only bombs dropped in that city, which just so happened to land near Daizenji, and the temple caught on fire and burned to the ground. So the one bomb that was dropped in that area would level the temple, right? And after hearing this, my grandfather hurried home and saw that the temple was now reduced to ashes. And as he walked and combed through the area in search of anything that he could salvage, he came across a small box tucked away in the rubble. And as he wiped off the soot and the ashes, he realized that the box he was holding was his mother's urn. And out of this entire area that he combed through, out of this entire area, it just so happened that he stumbled upon his mother's urn. What are the chances of that? There was no way he could pick that out. And yet, there he was, holding this box in his hands. Was it coincidence or was it meant to be? I don't know. I'll leave that for you to decide how to interpret that part of the story. Anyway, there is my grandfather holding this wooden box urn. And then he does something kind of peculiar. He puts it next to his ear and he shook the box, this ring. And what he heard was the bones of the ashes rattling inside the box. Keep in mind that cremated ashes in Japan are a little different from how they do it in America, in the sense that here in America, when remains are cremated, they're pulverized to this fine dust, right, as you all know. But if you've ever been to a funeral in Japan, you'll know that fragments of the cremated remains are still intact, right? And those are what's placed in the urn, okay? So, and that's a common practice that's practiced to this day. So going back to my story, my grandfather shakes this wooden box and he heard the rattling of the bones. Right? But as he hears this noise, what immediately resounds in his heart and mind is his mother's voice. Kondo, itsu kaite kuru no? How is this possible? She's not physically there. Is this his imagination? Is he recalling what happened? Or is it something much more profound that is taking place? It doesn't really matter what he thinks. It doesn't matter what we think, actually. What matters is that it happened, and that is what's real. And that's what we call the working of the world of great compassion. No hakarai, no calculation. It is just receiving. The thing is that, had that been me who rattled the box, I would have only heard bones rattling in the box. Right? Had that been my father, who's your kid, rattling the box, the same thing, you would have heard only the noise, right, of the bones. It had to be my grandfather, right, who had his specific karmic background, who was in that specific time and place in order for him to have encountered the timeless working of great life. This was his moment of the connection between time and timelessness, between finite and infinite. It is serendipitous, yet inevitable. It is indescribable, inexplicable, and inconceivable. Fukasho, fukasetsu, fukashi. And this kind of a world is beyond what we're able to define, discern, and comprehend just by human rationality and reasoning. All we can do is humbly receive this in gratitude. There is a world that is much more profound, that is at work right at this very minute. And the voice of his mom, Komano-san, when he shook that urn, was the working of Amida Buddha speaking to Kakuei-san, telling him to come here, telling him the Pure Land awaited him. You too will have your specific encountering with the world of truth that only you will understand. Right? It is the encountering that is customized to your karmic upbringing. It is universal for all, yes, yet specific to each and every one of you. And that oxymoron, right? That oxymoron itself is the very evidence of the limits of human reasoning. To the Buddha, this makes complete sense. To us, it is inconceivable. But when this encountering happens, all you will be able to do is to respond with Namo Amida Butsu, right? That's all there is left to do. It is you saying, message received, Namo Amida Butsu. Right? It gives me great joy knowing that moment will come to you someday, if it hasn't already. Then you'll know what Shinran Shonin was talking about. Then you'll know why this tradition has existed for 800 years, just counting from Shinran Shonin, 2,500 years from Shakyamuni Buddha himself. Then you'll know why all the criticisms against Jodo Shinshu that it's not a real Buddhism are all baseless and not deserving of any serious attention by you. Then you'll know why coming to temple is so damn important. Right? For each and every one of us, the Buddha is calling out to us as the Onenbutsu. Each of you will have your own story of how the Buddha's boundless compassion shook you to your core. It may not be through your mother, like it was for my grandfather. Perhaps it's through your spouse. Maybe. No, I'm just kidding. Perhaps it's through your pet dog. Or through an encountering with a random stranger. Perhaps it's when you're walking on the coast of the beach by yourself as the sun sets in the distant horizon. We don't know. But rest assured, we too are being guided by the immeasurable causes and conditions of a transcendent world of boundless wisdom and compassion. The more we hear this message, the more we come to encounter this world, the more we start to see it in our everyday lives. The world of absolute truth is always speaking to us. We just have to be ready to hear it. Right? And when we open our hearts up to this Nembutsu teaching, we will gain the ears to hear the Buddha's calling voice. I'd like to thank you for your time today and for giving me this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be the speaker of the Triple Celebration, recognizing the 850th anniversary of Shinran Shonin's birth, the 800th anniversary of the establishment of the Jodo Shinshu teaching, and the 135th anniversary of the Honpa Hongwanji mission of Hawaii. To recap what I first talked about, the Amida Buddha is the transcendence of space and time. Then I talked about the Nembutsu being the connection to Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha calls out to us, much like a mother would her child. And then we learn to respond back by saying Namo Amida Butsu. However, it's hard to understand this connection due to our blind passions. Nevertheless, despite having these blind passions, we're still able to awaken to the understanding that we are embraced in the world of great compassion. That connection is indeed universal, but it is also universally unique to your specific karmic causes and conditions. This honor of speaking today really makes me realize just how much we are being guided and supported by our loved ones and ancestors who came before us. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see the online booklet, but whoever made that booklet, I mean, kudos to you. That was a very well put booklet. And seeing those pictures, it really touched me, right? The very seat that you're on right now was made by those people who are in those pictures. Right? I was really moved. It really put things into perspective for me and how much we are being guided and nurtured by those who came before us. It was their wish for us to find true and lasting peace and happiness. It's not about knowing all these facts. Shinran Shonin lived from here to here. He was in the 12th century. And there's the 7 masters, and we got to know about what they taught and how that tradition got passed down the line, right? All those things, when that gets consolidated, it comes down to this wish of wanting us to find true and lasting peace and happiness. It is the same wish that coincides with Amida Buddha's primal vow for all sentient beings. It's just that Amida Buddha's primal vow is universal, right? But these ancestors make it more concrete. And then as that gets passed down the generations, it becomes more and more concrete. So it becomes very easy to understand the meaning of this primal vow through our ancestors and their working. I hope this occasion reinvigorates a sense of pride and joy, not only in our past, but also as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists living today. This will in turn become the same hope and wish for the next generation to be able to hear the calling voice of Amida Buddha's great wisdom and compassion. There is no greater gift we can leave behind other than this message of the timeless and universal embracement of the Buddha. All other things are fleeting and impermanent. Only the Nembutsu is true and real, right? So let's help spread this message to a world that so desperately needs to hear this teaching of universal spiritual liberation. Let's share the joy of the Nembutsu together with all beings of this world, just as the theme of this conference suggests. I'll close with the opening words from Shinran Shonin in his book, the Jodo Shinshu, which expounds the deep joy in encountering the wonderful Nembutsu teaching. Please join me in reflection and Takashi. How joyous I am, my heart and mind being rooted in the Buddha ground of the universal Tao, and my thoughts and feelings flowing within the Dharma ocean, which is beyond comprehension. I am deeply aware of the Tathagata's immense compassion, and I sincerely revere the benevolent care behind the Master's teaching attitude. My joy grows ever fuller, my gratitude and indebtedness ever more compelling. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.